Hope it's thinking.
Looks good on my end.
I see meeting is now streaming live on Facebook.
Me too.
Okay.
Is that what you see?
Anybody? Yes, I see that too. So I'm just gonna hope that it's working and hope for the best. So hello, audience. Thanks for joining us or watching a past broadcast if you are. We are here doing a retrospective on A Streetcar Named Desire. This idea was inspired by Jaclyn Johnson, who is here today because the National Theater Live is broadcasting their stream of their production of A Streetcar Named Desire. And it was 5 years ago that we did A Streetcar Named Desire, so we thought it'd be cool to go down the memory lane and talk about the show. So I'm really grateful that all of these wonderful people are here to talk about the show. Without further ado, let's introduce ourselves. I'm seeing that I'm actually first in the lineup, so I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Isaac Bont. I'm the marketing director at St. Croix Festival Theater. I was not involved in A Streetcar Named Desire at all. I'm just here as a mediator and to ask some questions and to let these wonderful people share their stories about the show. Moving on.
Hi, I'm Josiah Laubenstein. I played Stanley in A Streetcar Named Desire, and I'll hand it over to...
I'm Rachel Kuhnle. I played Stella in A Streetcar Named Desire.
I'm Jaclyn Johnson, and I played Blanche in Streetcar Named Desire.
Hi everyone, Mark Bear. I had the pleasure of directing the production.
Hi, I'm Peter Weber, and I did lights, sound, sets, and stage management for Streetcar Named Desire.
Hi, I'm Stephen Czajkowski, and I played Mitch.
Wonderful. Thank you all for being here. So my first question, this is kind of an open-ended question. You know, this week we brought up, okay, we're going to talk about A Streetcar Named Desire. I was wondering, when we bring that up, what's the first thought or memory that comes to mind when we said, we're going to talk about A Streetcar Named Desire from 2015? Just open-ended. Anybody have thoughts?
There's like infinite memories that come to my mind when I think about it, especially because I just love this group of people and all of the people that were involved in that production so much that like it just like sparks new and just warm memories as I think about it. But one of them that that comes up for me is I was so jealous that I couldn't see Gillian Anderson's production of Streetcar Named Desire, even though I didn't want to because I was playing Blanche, but I was so mad that I knew it was there and filmed and that I couldn't watch it. And I would talk about it a lot with this group of people and complain about it. And I did get my hands on the short film that you can watch. It's like a prequel to the production, totally original. But anyway, it was, I remember that. And that's why I brought this up, because when I finally knew it was available, I was like, oh, I want to watch it with these people.
So is tonight the first time that you're going to be able to see that production?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I looked at a little bit of I did a little bit of peeking, but I promised myself I wouldn't watch the production until tonight. So I did a little bit of peeking, but also found at the time these clips that you can find, right? That were advertisements or whatever, just to like see a little glimpse of what people were doing then with the production. And I think one of the things I'm excited about is see how they made it feel modern, because unlike our production, which was set when the play is set, their production is set in the current time. And so I'm curious about that, because I remember having conversations with Mark and with this crew, like, can this be, and how is this now, even though we're setting it in the time it was written? Yeah.
I remember we started the rehearsal process very early.
In the summer.
In the summer, like I remember having to drive to get there because we had like 4 or 5 rehearsals in April before we came back in August. I remember that very much. And I remember, this is my favorite story from this, is how the rehearsal process began. We all got in a room, we sat around a table together, and Mark Bear pulls out a bottle of Southern Comfort, sets it on the table, and says, "All right, let's get started." All by doing a shot of Southern Comfort and then talking about the play, which is a really great way to begin a rehearsal process.
Yeah, it was a very special group of people. That spring we were able to have, I think, yeah, you were there for 5 of them, Josiah, but I think we had close to 2 weeks
Okay.
rehearsal in April because we knew Jackie and I were looking at it. Jackie was producing the show, right, an artistic director at that time. Is that correct?
I was associate artistic director at that time, but yeah.
Right. So we were looking at the summer schedule and how to produce the show, and we were looking at less than 4 weeks to put the show up in the slot that we had, and we were like, that can't happen. So what are we going to do? And we came up with this different model where we would get together with just the principals early in the spring, and this show is structured where there are many smaller roles, but the people we have here are really the core company. And so we brought those people together, and I was blown away that those first 2 weeks. I felt challenged and close to everyone immediately, and that we really got great work done. And I think that work and then the break and then coming back to it, man, everybody hit the ground running just like we were hoping when we got into further rehearsals.
Let me understand. It was 4 rehearsals before you took the break, or like a week of rehearsals, or
close to 2 weeks. It was like 10 or 11 days, right, Jackie? It was
yeah,
close to 2 weeks.
And that was like just mostly just the Stella and Blanche scenes that were focused, except for the 4 days that Josiah was available. So we did what we could of those. And I remember sort of talking about the pillars during those weeks, like what are the corners that everybody's in and how do they stay in them throughout this show. I remember just that visual so hugely, and then talking about there's this 4th corner that we haven't even talked about, which was when Mitch would finally come. And like, it was just like, it was so interesting having that time with Rachel to like establish that sort of very, what I still think of as a sisterly relationship. And I'm so grateful that we had that time in these roles to work on together. And to have that time with like this tiny hint of who Stanley was, and to like know that blocking now and know those words sort of in an order. And then there's like still this like little mystery, which all of it feels very poetic, having gone through the production and sort of thinking about those pillars and what they mean to the characters. So yeah, I just remember that visual though, Mark. You talked about how everybody's in the corner of their ring and what sort of a brawl ensues at that moment.
Yeah.
Those first 2 weeks, that was really the first time I met Jackie. I didn't know her before 2015. I knew of her peripherally, but I'd never worked with her and never really knew her. And we kind of formed this sisterly bond in those first couple weeks that is still 5 years later pretty much intact. Which, I mean, it's always fun when you kind of have a showmance with an actor, and then that informs your relationship with them going forward. And so whenever I think of Streetcar, I think of like, well, that was the beginning of my relationship with Jackie, who we still now talk and tease each other like sisters. Yeah. And one of my just having that sisterly relationship of Blanche and Stella, and thinking of each other in that familiar kind of way, is one of my favorite artistic experiences, because it was just so fun and personal. And we took to it really, really well, it felt like. We really wanted that kind of intimacy. It was fun.
Similarly, that was my first time meeting Josiah and Rachel as well. So I think that sort of kicked off a similar type of relationship, acting with them and being in shows. Streetcar came up recently in discussion with my roommate and our friend, because I had to explain how many times I have been on stage with Josiah doing something. So that was nice. But I also spoke with my roommate recently about, like, we were talking about rehearsal processes that we really liked, and this one came up as one that I've always cherished, and I distinctly remember those. You know, I was there for maybe a week of that like first week of rehearsal, those early rehearsals in April, and I think it was just so instrumental to the success of the rest of the production, getting introduced to those characters very early on, and then getting to, once the rest of the season started, having that, and then having it sit with you before coming back to the rehearsal process. But I really think that those first rehearsals with just the four of us were very, very good. One of my favorite rehearsal processes.
Let's be clear. It was the beginning of a relationship for me and Jackie, but Josiah and Steven developed this. Also just carried the past 5 years. Or even when we're all in quarantine, they're playing chess online together and have long phone conversations.
True. It's true.
You gotta stay connected. Do you remember the Yat accent?
I was gonna bring it up. I was gonna bring it up as one of my distinct memories of this show.
Yeah, there's this Yat accent, which is like a New Orleans accent, which sounds vaguely like Brooklyn-ish. But that would have been, in theory, the accent that Stanley and Mitch had. And we used to watch this video every day before we would go on for the show, and it was this woman from that area named Mary, who
I don't know if we ever learned her name. I think maybe we named her Mary.
Maybe we named her Mary. She's like, the devil's, when it rains, when there's sunshine out, it's the devil's beating his wife.
His wife.
Yeah. That was like one of the things.
It's appropriate for this show.
Very appropriate for the show. Got us all.
Yeah, I feel like we watched that before most rehearsals once we discovered it.
Yeah.
And then before every performance.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's good to have a ritual for shows.
So let me understand, is that like a Brooklyn accent mixed with a Southern or a Cajun accent at all? Or is it mostly, tell me more about Yat.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's hard to describe.
But it's definitely like the sort of Creole accent is very thick down there. And this doesn't quite sound like that, but it has influences of that. It is very nasal. It had a very like way, because it comes from where, like they say, where you at, and that's why it's Yat.
Right.
So have you seen an accent tag video, Isaac?
I haven't.
It's like there's videos called accent tags, and no matter what accent it is, there's like a very specific list of words that you have to say, and that reveals a lot about the way you speak and the sounds.
And so people from all over the world, they post videos of themselves reading this script, right, in just their home dialect. So you can hear actual people reading this particular script from that area, right? And instead of you learning some kind of theory of the accent, you learn it from people who actually live there.
Nice. What about you, Peter? Your thoughts on?
Oh, favorite memories? Like Jackie, so many things come to mind. I really enjoyed working on that show. Like these people here are just some of the best people I've done theater with, you know? Every time I think of a show that's like, oh, that was a really good show, one or multiple of them have been involved, which is just great. And I don't know, it's hard to pick one memory. It's like, I have a list. I'm like, you know, I like the Simpsons references I made to Jackie for months leading up to casting that show, saying I could do a musical part in the number. They didn't go with it. You know, making Josiah an unbreakable radio because he kept on breaking stuff, throwing it at Stanley, just like, but I don't know. I guess if I had to settle on one, I'm going to go with bowling. Bowling is a part of the show. And a group of us guys one night were like, hey, they always talk about bowling. We should go bowling. And so many times in the summer leading up to and after the show, we'd just go bowling. And, you know, like there'd be a bunch of, you know, like we were talking about speaking in Yat, people would be talking in that accent, you know, it was just a great, like, feeling like of the show continuing on in our lives in a, you know, just we were living it, breathing it kind of thing.
When we were bowling, Josiah was in character. He was slightly mean to me.
Oh, so mean.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
He's competitive. You're
Let's
competitive. Josiah is competitive.
That is just
Of course.
Josiah.
We're all slightly mean to you. I mean, let's just be honest.
Also, thinking of the Yat accent, I was in New Orleans in January, and it is crazy that if you're in the city, it is prevalent. Everyone has that accent. It doesn't sound
Really?
like anywhere else that I've been in the South. It's very specific in that city. It's just how everyone talks. You know,
Yeah.
like, yeah.
I think your average person thinking about the show does not immediately think New Orleans, right?
Mhm.
They don't. Your average person doesn't place it there, and I think it sounds. I bet a lot of people would guess that it's in New York or Brooklyn or someplace like that. Just as a stereotype. Yeah.
I remember sort of going off the scenic elements that you just touched on, Peter. I remember that you discovered there was a slight shift in the wall at one point and then brought it to Mark that we could shift, like when the trains were going past and were supposed to be very loud and close, you could shimmy the walls and it would make the light that was in the center shake. And I just remember the feeling of that inside because it was on a platform. So there was a slight floor shake. It was a very lovely addition.
I love that. Oh God, I love that about the show. I really liked that set. Actually, it kind of, you know, it's funny. Williams wrote this actually very intimate show about 4 people, but then he wrote it in such a way that it's actually expansive. Like it requires this massive cityscape sets with all of this room to do all this other stuff, and you know, he puts the biggest, you know, the big emotional scene that everybody remembers. They run out of the house and up to the street, the fire escape, right? And so, and of course, we can't have that at festival. That's not what we're good at. Having that massive set infrastructure, right? And so the kind of little island of realism that we created in the middle of the stage with all of this color and all of this detail, and all of you guys did so much personal work with the props, you know, making every little corner of the set look real and kind of have a lived-in quality about it. All of these, the makeup and the, you know, the crunchness of it all. But then it kind of hanging even on our relatively small stage in the auditorium, the Civic Auditorium. It felt like it was floating there in the middle of that, and we could expand out of that sometimes with light and with bringing other characters on. But when it needed to get really small and claustrophobic, it really accomplished that. And the shaking made it seem even super realistic. There were other things too that made that little island feel really super realistic.
Well,
Speaking of the props, there was so much business. I remember in that show, so much. That first scene at the top of the show with just Stella and Blanche, there's so much business of opening cupboards and getting a Coke and opening a Coke, and just constantly I felt like I was in movement and dealing with all these hand props. And where's the lighter? Remember, like, the lighter, that was like a thing where the lighter was never where it was supposed to be. And how that was happening.
Do you remember there was a discussion on whether we were going to use a lighter or a match, and Mark really wanted to use a lighter.
Man,
Those
Mark.
matches.
Matches are sexy, Mark.
Yeah,
Oh, matches are sexy.
They're sexy until your actor's going.
they're
Yeah.
so sexy when they the first time.
Not so when you see an actor just struggling.
I gave in. I listened. I gave in.
Oh.
That's pretty great.
There were a lot of props. There were cards and beer bottles and
So much beer.
fans and radio, all sorts of stuff.
And
Well,
that-
when
How many beer bottles did you have to recap every night?
Yeah, that was cool.
Oh, there were so many bottles recapped. Like it was insane. You guys opened like 12 to 15 beers easily.
We had so much literal props in that show. I mean, it was a really big dream. There was mashed potatoes, there was pork chops,
Oh yeah.
right? I mean, it was so many huge things.
Pretzels.
Yes, and true to like what festival theater is kind of known for, and what I think was so great about that production is like it took everybody that was doing anything backstage to make every little piece of that work. Because that was Liz Athis, who's she's remarried, and I can't remember her new last name, but Liz and Elizabeth Albers that did the props, and they were both in the show at the same time, so they had entrances to make, and just such an amazing team all around. Everybody who was in that show, everybody.
Great job. They really did a great job. I remember that.
There's no way I was doing all that as well because I was in the booth, like a spider trying to get all the light cues and stuff. So I was not running backstage to try and get your guys' props set. They really did a great job.
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen just for a second. I have a picture of the set since Mark was talking about it. I was really struck by the colors of that set. Is that showing up?
Yeah.
Oh, super. Yeah, so colorful, so cool.
Yeah, and that's David Markson really managed to bring such vibrancy to that tiny little island, which looked so beautiful under the lighting design. And then also I should just mention, because we're talking about people who did great stuff and made us all look beautiful. It was Kim Murphy did the costume design, and she, almost always just delivers such things that feel so special to an actor. And every single thing I wore on stage was true to that.
That reminds me of another one of my favorite stories, costume parade for Streetcar Named Desire. I come out in this gorgeous dress, this absolutely beautiful dress. And at first everyone is humming and hawing about this dress. And then it's like, no, it's just not right. And Jackie is like the loudest voice as speaking as a producer at that time. It's just like, no, it's just not the right dress, not the right dress. And I remember being like, oh shoot, going backstage, putting it back on the hanger, like 3 dresses later, Jackie comes out wearing my dress, and that's her dress.
That is all true. All of that is true.
Yeah.
Remember it like being funny at the time, and also kind of feeling like that's not very funny.
The older sister.
Sorry, and I'm not at the same time.
Like something was taken from me in that moment. So that
It just
There's a difference between Stella's costuming and Blanche's costuming. There, a little difference.
it was a light color, color the butterfly wings. So
Yeah.
glug. I like that memory too because I remember it fondly, and it was always kind of a little funny, but also not.
it's okay. I had like 4 different pregnancy bellies that I had to track, and always work with every dress. So always Stella switching in and out of her different pregnancy bellies.
Yeah, we needed every minute of those intermissions. I do remember that too, just to change dresses.
Just scene changes in between stuff. We were always changing dresses. I changed my hair a few times and jewelry and stuff.
Yeah.
Scene changes reminds me of another thing. I said I did sound design, but I also need to acknowledge that Mark Baer, on like that first rehearsal, came to me and said, hey, I know you're doing sound design, and here are like a bunch of songs that I think fit very well for these transitions. So he made it very easy for a lot of those transitions because he had already done a ton of the work on pulling those sounds, and they were just orchestrated. It wasn't just a transition, you know, like lights change. It was very orchestrated, you know. There was, because they're all these extra characters that aren't the primaries, moving in and out of this kind of area around the main stage, and all of you 4 primaries in that space during it. It was just incredible. The passage of time, just there was no lull in the story then. It was wonderful.
This segues nice into a question I have for Mark. Speaking of you bringing some of your research sound design into the rehearsal process, I was just curious, as a director, you do a lot of research before the show starts, and then we get into a rehearsal process, and then the rehearsal process brings in the actors and their own takes on these characters, and direction and rehearsal is a marriage of these things and more. I'm curious about what was your research like for this show, and then how did the rehearsal process sort of evolve, I guess, your thinking on the show, or how did your thinking change when you had these new elements the actors brought in to your research?
Yeah. So the research for me, and I go back again to our rehearsal structure where we had 2 weeks early and then a break and then went into the process. And that was a real luxury in this case, because before that first 2 weeks, I focused most clearly about understanding, you know, general things about the place and time of the play, right? Making sure that I kind of understood what all the lines were referring to, the meanings of the words, so that I was prepared to lead table work, right? It was more about understanding the nuts and bolts of the given circumstances of this show, right? And then I was able to explore and raise questions in those first 2 weeks with the actors, so that then I went away and more of my understanding of the structure and the character development happened between those first 2 weeks, after I had gotten all the ideas and kind of we had worked together on the play and started to understand it in those first 2 weeks. Then I came back knowing exactly what goals we had to have for the full rehearsal process, right? But I have to give credit. This show was great because the company was great. I am at most a collaborator and try to create an environment where everybody can do their best work. I am not a person who brings in my own vision and then tries to force everybody else to do what I want. That's just not how I like to work, right? And so when I met all of these players and they seemed so perfectly put in their roles, it was very easy from that point. And we were able to do lots of fun experiential things that helped move that work forward.
Mark, you talked a little bit about the world and the other people. I do just want to give a shout out to all the other people who were in the show, because I remember all of them pretty fondly. I know Abby and Andrew played the neighbors, right? And then David was one of the friends. And then Sydney and Ed were the doctor at the very end coming in. And then Jerry was the...
Yep.
Oh,
and
Jerry.
Megan Clark too. Megan Clark was also in it.
Elizabeth Albert.
Elizabeth. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Such a cast, such a crazy big cast. But they really created that world.
Jerry, did we mention Jerry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For that fun little scene with the kiss, yeah.
Andrew.
It was a lot of fun. There were a lot of good people that came in and kind of helped flesh out some very small, like literally one-line characters.
Brought a lot to it.
To breathe a lot of life into that.
remember Elizabeth Albers had some of the funniest ad libs if you actually like were able to zero in on her part. Not necessarily intentionally funny, just funny in how specific they were. It's like, this woman has a life. She's got a life. That always cracked me up.
Yeah, I loved watching those little vignettes of the city like moving around. I loved those moments. And there was only a few where my exit would take me out to the house so that I could stand there and watch. And some of them were quick enough that you could watch a little bit of it even through the production. But gosh, those were so beautiful, just well choreographed. And again, just a testament to that great group of people that would just, you know, tell those little stories so specifically and make them so true each and every time they cross the stage. It's cool to watch.
Stephen, what was like one of the more challenging aspects of this production, this rehearsal process, or just this show that you can recall?
Looking back on it, I was still in college. I think I just finished my junior year. So I think initially I felt a little intimidated starting the rehearsal process, feeling maybe a little inadequate, going up against, you know, actors like Jackie and Rachel and Josiah, who I didn't know but seemed very competent and good, and Mark, who had directed me the summer before, so I know that he was a great director. So I think initially I felt a little intimidated, but I got over that, I think. And then yeah, I think that's the thought that comes to me at the moment, unless you have any other questions. But there was a paper lantern that gave me some trouble.
Tell me more about the paper lantern, Stephen.
It's a sort of thing where, you know, you're on stage and acting in a scene, and then you have some sort of business to do. And a classic example would be like, you know, tying your shoe. You can tie your shoe 100 times and then tie your shoe on stage, and all of a sudden you're overthinking it and you forget how to do it. But the task I was assigned was a little more complicated than tying a shoe. There's this paper lantern that Blanche has, and when they go back to the apartment, Mitch has to put it on a light bulb. And
may I share, Isaac? May I share a relevant photo?
Of course, please do.
You have a photo of this?
Oh no, you have my screen sharing disabled, so never mind.
Oh.
You can enable it, I think.
Let's see. I've enabled it.
But it was just it felt like such a race against the scene. I only had so many seconds or so to do it.
Well, this is a lovely photo, but I don't have a paper lantern.
That was hot.
It was a hot show, my friends. I just want to say it was a hot show. I was very proud of that, because if you do Streetcar and it's not hot, steamy, multiple times, then you've missed something. And I'm not sure how many steamy productions Festival has done over the years, but this was one of them. It was good times.
Stephen, how tall are you?
6 foot.
Okay. Do you remember when you auditioned and asked you how tall you were?
No.
What you said was 6'1" in my stocking feet, which is what Mitch's lines is. And I laughed so hard when you did it. And I was like, he's not 6'1", but he knew the line.
Yeah.
Are you sure you're thinking of me?
Yeah, I am.
That is such
all about it. Yeah.
Stephen to do, Stephen. You may not remember doing that, but that's all the more because that's exactly the kind of stuff you do.
I don't remember this.
Well done.
And you know all the details about your character before rehearsals even start.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Stephen. I remember it
That
happening. I remember it.
I also remember the bat appearing during, there are several times when bats would just show up a little bit and like play and just upstage you, as an actor, you're getting upstaged. And I do remember at the end of Act 2, in like the kind of climactic moment of that monologue, beautiful lighting, soft, almost going to leave you thinking that this could end happily, even though it's so tragic, and this bat swoops in and starts circling my head. Do you remember that, Steven?
Scene-stealing bat.
Yeah.
That scene-stealing bat.
Civic auditorium full of bats.
Yeah.
I do remember one rehearsal, the air conditioning was not functioning, and I was convinced Mark Baer broke it on purpose to try to bring us into the environment of just how hot it was.
To make it steamy.
Yeah.
To make it steamy.
Yeah. Boo. Oh, sisters.
Good one.
Poor little Stella. She's so good.
Hey, stay on that photo for a second.
Okay.
Now, this photo reminds me of a story from this. That purple light that's on them there is an inspiration that came to me at like 1 a.m, because lighting design on this show I was designing late into the night, and it was like 1 a.m. I was like, yes, I'll put purple light in this moment. It'll be beautiful and great. And it just like, it ended up like a lot of times if you have that thought 1 a.m, it's never good, right? You look at it the next day and go, wow, I was really tired. But there was just enough like little white parts like in the shirt and her slip and the bed frame that it was just, I thought, a real wonderful moment.
Yes.
It's a pretty intimidating scene to have to perform. I know. I was in my head about it for a long time.
Ain't that the truth? That's the iconic Stella moment.
Right.
Everybody knows it. Everybody quotes it. Everybody's expecting it. That's always one of the tricky parts about doing a show like this, or like Death of a Salesman, or like, any of those sort of iconic moments. People are waiting for those moments, and you as the actor are often aware that those moments are coming.
I know.
Well.
We both definitely talked to.
Look at that sexy.
Look,
I'm sorry.
There's a match, right? Yeah.
Look at how sexy match.
I haven't taken pictures of it.
Also, we were using fake cigarettes, so I couldn't actually light the cigarette. I just had to hold it in front. So I had to light it and then hold it in front, like 1.5 inches in front of the cigarette, so that it didn't melt the cigarette.
Actually, I wanted to ask the two of you, pretty much everybody, this is an iconic show. I wanted to talk about that Stella moment with Josiah and Rachel, sort of about what was it, I guess not what's your interpretation of these characters, or more like what was it like to explore these characters and like take that moment. Rachel, you were saying that you talked about it a lot. In that moment, what made it your own, or what was your, I guess, interpretation?
Well, Josiah and I would have conversations about how this show can be kind of intimidating, getting to play such an iconic play, and for so many actors, such a dream play with dream roles. And I know Josiah, like just a few weeks before getting cast for this show, was specifically told, well, you'll never be a Stanley. You'll never play.
Yeah.
And you talked about that all the time. And then I'd be like trying to help you not let that bother you. And you're like, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me that was said. It doesn't bother me. But you talked about it all the time.
Shut up.
But so I think, with anything like that, your job as the actor is to just, go back to good script work and what just trust yourself as an actor, trust your director, trust the company and your scene partners, and really find, I know for Stella, there was a lot of like, well, what makes me, Rachel, curious about Stella? What's the like, what is it about what she does, what she says, how she lives her life that is really strikes me, stimulates curiosity with me. And I never got bored asking those questions about Stella's. There's always just more to kind of imagine and to sink into, to kind of get really specific with her story and her part of the story.
Yeah, I think with those moments, similar to what Rachel said, you want to find what connects you to this person. You know, I truly believe that there is something in me that connects me to every character that I play, even if, you know, Stanley is not necessarily, I'm not very similar to Stanley. I may just not be very similar to this person that I'm playing, but there is always something to connect you to that. There's always something about you that you're like, yeah, I connect with that. I connect with getting angry over this. I connect with these emotions. I connect with this response. I connect with this need to be loved and feeling like I am the person who is the object of my love is being stolen away from me. I connect with all that stuff. And maybe Josiah would react differently, but you know, Stanley reacts in the way he reacts, and it's good. It's actually a touching moment. We think of it as this sort of like primal, you know, Marlon Brando moment, but it's actually quite lovely, I think. After, okay, well, maybe not Rachel, but I you know, it's like a reconnection in a way that you think of it like that.
I mean, it's a play about passion. It's a play about passion. It's a play about abuse. Passion and abuse. It's a really often both are present. And that moment where he literally goes from screaming at his wife in front of all their friends and hitting her to then running out in the street screaming her name, and she goes back to him. I'm just getting chills just thinking about it right now. There's just a lot, and there's reasons why this play gets done, still gets done, will continue to get done.
Yeah, and just to say, like, to build off of those ideas and to sort of recognize, I think, why this feels like such a playground for artists, because it's such a amazingly deep script that is an honor to spend whatever time you get to and just trying to analyze pieces of it, parts of it, let alone the whole thing or a character's track. Like, every part of it is a joy, which is why I think it was wonderful to have a really long time with it, why it's fun to be able to talk with your friends who you got to work on with it and remember all of these, you know, beautiful moments that some of them were heartbreaking, some of them were violent, and some of them were all of those at the same time, because it's such a rich play. I feel so privileged to be able to think about our memories. Thank you for doing that with me, friends. You're all really good at what you do, and that was 5 years ago.
Well, I mean, you made it happen, Jackie. And one of my best memories, I mean, I love everybody in this cast. And it was strong top to bottom, but I was thinking about it changed our relationship from my side, Jackie. I don't know how you felt about it, but for me, up to that point, I knew you were a great friend to me, and you were, and always have been, just an amazing producer. You were a gifted reader of people and able to bring people together at Festival. And Festival had so many companies that you brought together that were really special and brought so much to the community there. But I really didn't know you as an actor, as a powerful leading lady, until this production. It changed my whole, it pushed my respect for you up another 3 notches working on this play with you.
Thank you, Mark. I'm glad I'm wearing makeup right now because I'm very red underneath my foundation. But I would say yes. I think that that's true about when I think about all the artists that worked on the show. Like it's my respect for everybody and what they put into this, and yeah, and I'm sure that there are many other people who have worked on other productions that feel that same way, because it feels like such a gift to have this time with this play. Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Thank you all.
Well, we've been chatting for about 45 minutes about this show, and we could probably chat more, but I think that we should call it for our live stream audience and say, as you heard them talk about, this is a powerful, wonderful piece of the American theater canon. And right now you can see it at National Theater Live's website. I think their program is called National Theater Live at Home, because we're all at home right now. And you can check that out until Wednesday or Thursday. I can't remember which. So I think the rest of us are probably going to check this out very soon. And we hope that you enjoy it too. Thanks for coming out. And thank you to all you wonderful artists for your thoughts on this play. Bye, live stream audience.
Bye.